It's time to talk politics with Roni and Sheila.
Good evening, everyone. This is takeback.org, and I'm Sheila.
And I'm Roni, and our guest tonight, one of our favorite guests, Nancy Wyman, who is Lieutenant Governor, and the first woman governor to be elected on the Democratic Party.
Lieutenant Governor. Right.
Lieutenant Governor, yeah.
Well, as a Democrat.
We can call you Gov anyway.
Thank you. Yes, you can, because it's not around, so it's okay. Doesn't matter.
I said before, I really was interested in talking about the Republican governors who are trying to limit the ability to vote, the registration. We think differently in Connecticut.
We do.
So please tell us what we've passed to make sure that everyone can vote.
You know, you're absolutely right, that what we're seeing around the country is more and more restrictive times to vote, making sure that, less people can vote. The governor and I and our Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, are active to making sure that we can get as many people out to vote as possible. And so this year was a great year. There's been a bill out there for years that we wanted to have passed. And that means that people can go in and register to vote the same day as an election. Why should we tie the hands of people? Let's make sure we can get everybody out there to the polls. Let them come out and voice their opinion. I mean, that's what people fought for. That's what our veterans fought for, is the right for people to vote. And so as the other states might be going the way of closing off, we're opening it up. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote.
I see that the same-day voter registration bill did pass.
Yes, it did.
And it says that you have to declare under oath when you go to the polls that you have not previously voted in the election and submit identification showing a residential address. Well, what is that identification? You see in these other states, as Roni was saying, they're asking for IDs and a certain type of photo ID, and if you don't have it, you're out of luck. What is the identification that will be required?
Similar to what we do now. When we go in to vote, you have to show your identification. We've always shown the identification. Your driver's license. You can, a lot of, down in Florida, my mom because she never drove, she had something approved by the Motor Vehicle Bureau that had a picture on it and her address on it, because she was never a driver. But basically, it's a driver's license, or, any kind of, thing that has your picture on it. It could be a student ID from our college.
Could it be a bill, like it says you have to show your residential address? Could it be your electric bill?
Sure,
you
can do that. You can show where you live and make it as easy as possible.
Not necessarily a picture ID then.
No, that doesn't have to be. It makes it a lot easier if it is a picture ID.
I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but are there other states doing what we're doing, trying to expand as opposed to what is getting all the publicity now about closing down the voter rolls?
You know what? I really don't know. But I think Connecticut has always been a leader in doing things to making sure that people have their rights. And so right now, this was a big thing for us. And as I said, that has been out there. People have been talking about it for years and years and years. We finally got it done. And I really believe it's because we have a Democratic governor.
And other states have early voting. I know that's something that maybe our Secretary of State will consider, where you can start to vote 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
But as Roni was saying again, a state like Florida that had, I think, a 2 or 3 week pre-voting, you could vote, they're cutting that down now to just 7 or 8 days and doing everything possible to cut the votes of certain people that we know might have a harder time to get to the polls.
And, that's something else that I know that Denise is looking at. And we'll probably go forward on that also maybe in the next couple of years, but that's something that she's been looking at. It makes sense that people should be able, if they want to vote early, that they can. Just making sure that they're only voting once, and there are ways of checking that.
Cool.
So it's not, everybody says, oh, it's going to bring more fraud. I don't believe that's going to bring fraud.
Fraud is such a minor point.
The absentee ballots. Right now, is it still, you have to be out of town on that day? Or
no, also, I think it's in this bill that says, you can just, it can be an absentee ballot even if you are.
You don't need a particular excuse. You're not going to be there.
If you can't make it that day, you can't make it that day. But you want to make sure that you get your ballot in.
And hopefully, Denise will do a good job of publicizing all of this in advance of the
I'm
election.
sure she will. Yeah,
So,
no.
yeah.
Our Secretary of State is out there all the time
She's
trying
good,
to
yeah.
really get the word out to everybody about what is going on. So,
So
I'm
what do
sure
you
she'll be
think
doing
were
it.
some of the other good pieces of legislation that you and the governor supported and wanted passed and signed this year?
You know, I think there's there's one that for me that was important, that we have the healthcare advocate sit on what we call the healthcare exchange board. And now she's been sitting there, but she hasn't had the right to vote. So I'm glad that we've seen that. We did some great things on education this year.
Tell us about it, because it was very controversial
Yes,
in the
it was.
beginning.
It was
Why
very
were there some of the teachers groups were opposed to what the governor first articulated? Describe what happened.
I think, let me just say this, the governor and I really believe in education and have been fighting for this for years. You know the governor's background of being a child with disabilities and how his respect for the teachers and, of course, his mother, that made him change. You know, in 5th grade, still, the governor tell the story that he couldn't even button his button yet, and how he had such a learning disability. So the governor has so much respect for our teachers because they truly do a great job, and his teachers helped him go through a tremendous, terribly difficult time, right? I come from the side that got me into politics was because I wanted my children to have the best education they could. And I know I told the story before about I had to find out how to get rid of the Board of Education in town. And it wasn't just the Republicans, it was the entire Board of Education. And so I thought it was a great idea to impeach them. Of course, we can't impeach a Board of Ed. And so I started my career advocating for kids, advocating for teachers, advocating for a good education system. And I just want to tell everybody that you can't impeach them, but you can impeach the president. I don't understand it. But the next thing I knew, I was sitting on that Board of Ed. And we're out there pushing for education because we have the biggest achievement gap in the country.
Really? Is
We
that
do.
true?
Yes, it is. It's sorry to say that we do have that.
In our public schools?
Yes.
Do we have an inordinate number of the more upper, middle, and upper classes going to private schools so that our
No.
public schools have more?
No, you look at the same scale
Okay.
of people, and our kids are from the top to the bottom. So the governor, and his feeling was that education was going to be that, and jobs were really going to be our focal point. We came out with an education bill that it was a very long bill, and it wasn't always explained properly, and people assumed things were in the bill that weren't there. And we took the bill on the road. It basically talks about increasing more preschool education, early childhood education by 1,000 new seats for kids, because we know the younger that we can grab these kids and teach them, the better we are. We need to make sure that every one of our children are learning reading by the 3rd grade, so that they don't have a slip up and go backwards. It shows that those children that are learning by 3rd grade are going to have an easier time in school. They're usually going on to college and being very successful, and usually don't have learning disabilities afterwards that they have to be dealt with. So we want to make sure we catch everybody that way. At the same time, we want to have everybody evaluated properly, and making sure that our kids are evaluated, our teachers are evaluated, and our principals are evaluated. And so there was a system, there's a group that's called PEAK, and it was made up by 2 of the teachers' unions and some other people from education, like the principals and superintendents, and they came up with an outline of how the teachers should be evaluated and what should happen to, what are we going to do with tenure, basically. Right. And so one of the big unions put this booklet out, and that's where we took it from. At the same time, all of a sudden, they didn't like it. So there was this big uproar. I will tell you that 90%, we negotiated with the teachers, we negotiated with the principals, negotiated with everybody. And we believe that the education package that we put out is an excellent education package. Not only are we giving more money to those school districts that need it, we're also making sure that the commissioner has a say over how that money's being spent. With all due respect, we don't want the money going to pay for a new town hall, but we do want it to go into the classroom to help our kids really advance. So we're really kind of excited. That's of that I think we took on this session. And it's kind of interesting. If you look at the votes of the House and the Senate, you had both parties voting for this. They think, it turned out to be a great bill. Liberals, conservatives, moderates, whatever, all came together and saw that this is a big step forward for the children of our state.
And I saw Randy Weingarten, who's the head of the American Federation of Teachers, on TV with the governor, Governor Malloy, and she was complimenting the state for taking the steps and approving of what
Randy's
what
a
had
wonderful,
happened.
wonderful woman from New York, and who really cares about her unions and cares about her teachers, but before that, she cares about the kids.
Yeah, I've seen her on.
Yeah, she's absolutely wonderful. And some of the things that she talked about were what we put into the bill. The governor had met with Randy previously, and so some of the things that he talked about. We all know that some of our teachers need boosting up. Majority of, a large percentage of our teachers are great teachers and really caring in the classroom. And those are the teachers that should always have support. And the other ones, we want to make sure that they really get real support. Not to put people in a big classroom and say, oh, here's how we're going to support you. We're going to put you with a bunch of other teachers that don't need the same kind of maybe remedial help as you do. We're going to instead have not these big classrooms. We're going to have people come in and help the person in the classroom that thinks they need the help. And so it's a different look at education, but it's one that I think that is good for the students of the state.
There are two aspects. My daughter's a teacher, and I hear plenty from her. And she said part of the problem are the parents. The parents who say, do your homework, what did you do today? That works well for the child. The parent who just completely ignores it apparently allows the child to fail, really.
In some ways, you're absolutely right. But the truth is that in some of our places right now, we have young parents, young mothers, that didn't have an education of their own. And one of the things that we're talking about is an adult learning also. That we have to bring in some of our parents and help them understand what the schoolwork is. And there's a big thing that, a child comes home and this mother is working all the time trying to do what needs to be done. And the child comes home and says, Mom, I don't know how to do this. And the mother doesn't know how to do it. And so the mother says, you know what? Don't worry about it. The teacher will help you in school tomorrow, because she's embarrassed or he's embarrassed that he or she can't help the child. So we have to try to do more, because you're right. Your daughter is absolutely right. There is the problem of not being able to support the child financially or educationally. It is the amount of food on their tables. It's some of the conditions that they're living in. It's not just by any means. The teacher has to take on much more roles now than they did many, many decades ago, when they could go into a room and just teach. They give a lot of loving to these kids, and sometimes it's a real balancing act. And so we understand that. That's why we have some great. We have a lot of great teachers in the state, but they're taking on more. The schools are taking on more of a burden than they did before.
The salary, I don't know much about that ed bill. Are the salaries increased?
No, that's negotiated at the local level. That's not done by the state. What we have increased in money is money going back under the grant that's going back to the cities and towns to prevent, as we did the year before, there was a big hole in the budget. Well, there was lots of holes in the budget, but one of the big holes in the budget was about $230 million that they had taken from one-shot deal money and plugged it in. So besides the $3.5 billion deficit, we had to be able to keep the towns at least even. We had to find $230 million to do that. And we were able to do that because the governor and I really believe in we have to fund education at the right level. Now, we don't have a whole lot of money now, but that's the one thing that's not going to be cut is the funding of education.
Yeah, will we ever tackle the issue of education being paid for through the property tax and the inequalities that
that's a real difficult thing.
Yeah.
And, you have to kind of have money. And there is a task force out there now that is coming up with, I would hope, recommendations that's studying what we call the ECS formula, the formula that derives how much money is sent back to the towns. Hopefully they'll come up with a new one, and all the towns will be on the right basis of being funded.
Let's talk about two big issues that you were involved in at the beginning of this whole campaign for governor that you and Malloy won. Jobs and the budget. How do we get our budget balanced? What did we do? What sacrifices did we make? And is it working?
That's good questions all at once, and we only have this half an hour. Okay. When we came into office, we found a $3.5 billion deficit. That's a lot of money, and we sat for hours and worked on it. I mean, hours and days and whatnot to work on how do we get this balanced. How do we do it where it's equitable for people? And so the only way we could do it, and it was very tough for all of us for the governor and I, is we made some major cuts in the budget. We had to increase taxes, which we really didn't want to do, and we had to ask from our unions to give back a lot. And we did all three. And you find out that sometimes leadership doesn't make you popular, but you still have to do it. Somebody had to straighten up this train wreck that was happening in the state. Now the union stepped in. Everybody's paying more taxes. We are, as I said, it was $3.5 billion, and I will tell you that we're about $200 million in the hole. So we balanced it basically from that $3.5 billion down to a deficit of about $200 million, which we are finding and cutting more programs, cutting more things within state government to get that balance. So we will have a balanced budget by the end of June 30th this year. So that's not easy to do. Most people can't get that way.
What are you cutting?
Well, a lot of things like I was going to borrow your cup so we can reuse it and get some of the paper that you have there, but that's what we're going to be doing. It's the cuts that we can have right now.
Well, there are a lot of states across the country, again, in the states that are controlled by Republican governors and legislatures that are dismembering public employees' unions and
Medicare.
And
the medical help and
reducing the workforce. Are we reducing the workforce of our public employees?
Well, we had 3,000 retirees last year. They retired on their own because in the negotiations we changed some of the pension obligations that we have because that's some of the things that nobody ever talked about before. We want to not only look for today, we had to look for the future. And over the next 20 years or so, we'll have spent, because of the negotiation, we'll have saved about $20 billion in pension stuff, which is very, very important in the future. Are
the pensions secure? Are the public employees' pensions stable?
They will be stable. They are stable.
Okay.
We have a lot to do to fund them. That's part of the unfunded liability that's very large in our state. And we're going to do that. It's an obligation that we have, and we're going to pay those pensions, so nobody should worry about that. But there's better ways of doing it, putting money aside to have ready for it rather than pay as you go. And so we have we've changed some of that around. So when 3,000 people retired on their own so that they could keep the benefit level that they have now. Right. So that's it was a big step. On the jobs, quickly, we had a special session on jobs. We got bipartisan agreement on it. We're bringing more businesses into the state. We are trying to find jobs for our veterans and give tax credits. We're helping our small businesses and helping our large businesses. I don't know how much more time we had, but
We have more
wanted to get
time, we
that
have more
in.
time. And jobs is a
Yeah.
big, big issue.
Yes,
You
it is.
mentioned before we went on the air, the governor is going to Israel, he's
Israel
going to
and-
China. Tell us about those
Yeah, and
trips.
he's, the governor has been going out, and he said he was not going to be a sit-down governor, and he has not been a sit-down governor. He has been working to bring more businesses into the state. We have a great example of a brand-new business coming into the state from Maine. It's called Jackson Labs. It'll be all about bioscience, bringing in new, making this maybe the bioscience center of the country, hooking it up to our university system up at in Farmington. Because of that announcement that was given about a year ago, we have other companies now looking to come in and be part of it. We see all of that building. The governor will have an announcement, and I don't know when it's going to be announced, that there'll be a new company from out of the country. In fact, I think it has been announced. It's settling in Stanford. This is exciting. They don't have any place in the United States at all, and they decided to come to Stanford, our state. It's because what they're finding now is that we have a government that is open for business. We want these businesses in. We want to build them up, and from the smallest to the largest.
Do we give them tax breaks to come here?
Some of them we do. Yes, some of them do, and they have to have a certain amount of employees by a certain time, depending upon what the agreement is. And we're helping those small businesses by saying, okay, if you start for the first 3 years, if you need help hiring a veteran, we'll help subsidize you. But then you have to keep him or her for years afterwards, for 5 years afterwards. So these companies are trying to build, and at the same time, there's ads out there that basically said, if you're out of work for over a year, need not apply. We're saying, you come in and apply, and we'll help subsidize that so that we can get people working again. In the long run, this is better for the state. It's better for all the businesses in the state, because if you're working, you go out and spend
So
money.
we've seen some progress. I mean, one of the problems we've had is not only do we have no jobs in the past 10, 12 years in this state, but we
20
had
years.
a brain drain, people leaving, and our
Right.
population declining. Is that on the
We're seeing
on
a
the mend? Is
big
that
change right
changing?
now. We're seeing about 18,000 new jobs. In fact, there was just an article that came out today, and we are, I think, 7th in the country in seeing us gaining jobs and gaining businesses in the state, so in the country. So in this short period of time, so we're really excited about that. We have a lot more to do, though, and the governor and I are not going to sit by
And
and
certainly
do
are an
nothing.
energetic bunch. So
Oh, that's
On
for
the,
sure.
on the healthcare front, I've been reading that you're trying to prepare for the Affordable Care Act, which is
Right.
be coming online soon.
Right.
What happens if the Supreme Court turns down that law or the mandate? Are we still working in
Well,
Connecticut?
there are, in fact, I will tell you, there was an announcement the other day that some of the factors that were in the Affordable Care Act, or are in the Affordable Care Act, some of our healthcare insurance companies are already said, even if that doesn't happen, we'll keep it going.
You mean like the
Yeah.
26, the age
26-year
26?
age and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So that's exciting. We're going to go forward. We're going forward to look at to see what we can do. The problem is going to be there. If the Affordable Care Act, if the Supreme Court comes in and makes a statement that's not good, we're going to still be looking to see, because we know our people need the help. Not only those that, there's a lot of our people that are uninsured. 300,000 people in the state of Connecticut are uninsured. But also, more and more people will be uninsured if our businesses can't afford to buy health care. If you can't afford to get out there and purchase it, more and more people.
Whatever
and
happened
the
to that
prices
bill
going
that
up.
was supposed to allow businesses to hook into the state purchasing?
That, because the problem with that is the federal government said you can't really do that.
Oh, that's too
But
bad.
as a state, if we want to have single-payer health care, we can. The Supreme Court has nothing to do with that.
That's right, if we had the money.
Yeah.
There's a- you know, and it's always great. And
Yeah.
everybody, you know, I'm sure everybody would love to have single payer.
Apparently the
But-
Republicans don't, but do go
Well,
on.
that's true, but it's only because it's the bottom line. And we can't, you know, right now, we don't know where we get the bottom line. But at the same time, even though I say that, we can't afford not to do something.
Right.
Because people are hurting. And in the long run, if they don't get that preventative care, in the long run, it'll cost us all more. Because you and I are going to pay for those that are uninsured
Exactly.
when they go into the
Emergency room.
right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
So we've got a lot to do. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still
Yeah.
so much to
Well,
do.
It seems that you and the governor, first of all, you've been working as a team, and you took on the lieutenant governorship with the idea that you were going to be a
Yeah.
full partner, and I guess you are.
Yeah,
But you're making decisions that are really, without regard to how it's going to play politically, you're trying to do the right thing. And the one issue that, to me, shows beyond that you're doing that is the death penalty issue. A lot of people had to maybe take a tough vote that may not appeal to some of their voters in November. So tell us about that. The governor was very firm on
You know,
that.
both of us had talked about this beforehand, and we believe, and he came to it one way, and I came to it a different way. We happen to believe that that was something that's an internal thing to us, that we don't believe in the death penalty. I don't want to point fingers at the judicial system, but, you know, we've let some people out that because they spent a lot of time in jail, because and they were wrongfully convicted. I happen to, you know, I voted against, I voted for the repeal of death penalty many years ago when I was a state rep. I happen to believe in that. And the governor came through it as a prosecutor, and he believed in it. And some of the decisions you make are in your heart, and you don't point fingers at people that disagree with you on that, because that decision is a real personal one. The legislature voted on it, and the governor signed it.
Okay. So we're getting out of time. So what's on tap now? You're heading for what project now?
I don't know. Right now, I'm going to go talk on affordable housing
Okay.
for people. I leave here and go for that, and then the governor is speaking at a reception tonight that I'll be going to. And you know what? We still have, even though we looked at a lot of it, we still have to create more jobs, more businesses into our state, get people employed. Our unemployment fell from over 9% down to 7.8%, but we have to get it down lower. So
Right.
we're out there fighting for everybody.
We have to wind up.
We have to.
Thank you so much for having me
As usual,
again.
it's been such a pleasure having you.
my pleasure to be
Especially with
here.
all the good news.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you next time on takeback.org. Good evening.
Good evening.
evening.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.